So since I made my last video about ligatures, I've received a number of messages about people who really liked it and have said, where do I find one of those German silver patented Bonade ligatures? And I'll start by reiterating what I said. All of this is not objective, it's just where it fits in the system. It's great for the mouthpieces that I like, for the type of environments I play in. I play in a very, very dead hall. And I think of the 1959 Alfred Hitchcock movie Vertigo, where it was a filmic technique invented when Jimmy Stewart's character looks at the ground and the distance between him and the foreground seems to lengthen, and it was used in Poltergeist and a number of movies. And I almost think of doing the opposite. When I play, I want the distance between myself and the audience to pull in, and there to be almost an illusion there, but also it makes my job easier. So I want to start off with a great and far more practical solution than that German silver Bonade. And this is a 1970s Bonade. It has very long screws. I learned about this from Ethan Sloan in Boston. And I'm once again playing that Henri Chevelle that's very similar to like an M14, M13, M13 lyre. This is the heaviest Bonade ligature that's still, I mean, it feels just as heavy as a lot of the modern ones, but it's a lot denser. The screws, even though they're longer, are lighter. They have almost a diamond shape to the screws. If I compare that to the very early block patented German silver Bonade, about it, in addition to its unbelievably fast response and its extremely big sound that this mic is not picking up. This mic just makes it seem bright, but to the audience it's actually much bigger, much darker, is the fact that I can get such an intimate, sensitive sound. I'm really not working as hard, and it creates this nice contrast between orchestral sound and chamber sound. All right, here's that modern Bonade from my last video. Even that first note I played. This is the same reed, same mouthpiece. Alright, I can mess with making the ligature maybe a little bit lower, but that's not going to do too terribly much. I can mess with tightening the top screw a little bit more, or a little bit less. I'm going to tighten the bottom one more, the top one less. It's better, but you can only do too much. So, what if I put the screws from the German silver Bonade in the modern Bonade ligature? You know, it's amazing to me how overlooked this variable is. And I think it's especially important on ligatures that put the screws on the reed. I think that is that has much more impact than when the screws are more indirectly tightening the reed. This is also partly where I like ligatures that put the screw tension directly on the reed. I actually have more control that way. More options, more variables. All right, this is that same ligature, same reed. Modern bonade with the old German silver paddle screws. Different material, different chemical composition, but also different weight, different shape. Promise you this is the same ligature. How is that the same ligature? That is, in a way, that's kind of the best of both worlds. Slightly more covered than the German silver bonade, but still the great response. So you might say, okay, fine, that doesn't solve anything, because you still need an original German silver bonade. But what I say is there are so many sets of screws, so many variables you can experiment with, so very many. So I've got one that's just an old 2-screw stock ligature, like off of a very old clarinet. Happens to be a German silver ligature. And the screws happen to have kind of an extreme paddle shape, kind of looks like an oar. So similar weight, similar, in a way, similar design to the golden German silver bonade. This is the same ligature. How is that the same ligature? How? How? Really quickly. I'll go back to the original screws. You know, I talk to a lot of saxophone players who are after they have a heavy mass neck screw that they put on the neck receiver, and there's a lot of science behind it in terms of creating nodes, sound nodes, and sound waves, and it's interesting that a lot of what these classical saxophonists are doing is wanting to limit their sound. So these screws, these are the original bonade screws, circular design, very, very heavy, lot of mass. What percentage worse is that? I mean, to me, this is unusable. Now, you might say, okay, Dale, but still, that's just talking about the design of these old style stock ligature screws is different, but now the material is different too. So to prove this, I have a gold plated bonade I got from Taplin Weir. I love it. I used to use it all the time. Well, I took the screws from it. They are the same exact screws like what I just played. Same exactly, they look identical. But they're gold plated. I was talking to one of the all-time great clarinet players, and he said he put in gold screws on an old nickel plated ligature, and Loved it. Once again, I say this is the same ligature, same reed, same mouthpiece, same orientation. The same ligature, even the response, right? Ridiculous. Even the pitch of articulation is different, and that's just from plating some screws. I've got a few more here that I want to mess around with. I've got another set of German silver screws. Again, this is just an old stock 2-screw ligature. I think it's a real shame that so many young students are wanting to change ligatures, change ligature design, because they see the stock 2-screw design, and it's obvious. You know, it's one of the most obvious and visible aspects of clarinet equipment, but is the design really broken? Or is it just made out of bad material with poor attention to detail? These are pretty thick German silver screws, still a little bit paddle design. Some of the other combinations. Still way better than the original screws. I've got an old Leyland Fedele ligature. I'll grab the screws off of it. I don't want to speak in generalities, but I think that reverse ligatures, a heavier mass screw is of more benefit than a front-facing ligature, or at the very least, it's not as damaging. I'm not saying that going too light is good either. I'll show you that in just a second. All right, Fedele or Leyland ligature screws, same but odd. That's ridiculous. That reminds me of like Gigliotti. I really love. Yeah. And again, completely transforms what the ligature is about. So here's an interesting test. Ishimori ligature screws, solid silver Ishimori. I know how popular these are, and you know, part of it is the screw thread is also very thick. It's not just the head of the screw. Once again, I kind of alluded to it. Reverse ligatures can have heavier screws. So can a bonade sound eerily similar to an Ishimori? I even hear the same, I mean, that sounds just like an Ishimori. Is all of what's good about an Ishimori the screws? I think so. Here's the left hand. That sounds like an Ishimori. That's got that very clean, very focused sound. Not quite as expansive up in the high range. It sounds like an Ishimori. And again, I love those ligatures, but I still like the old bonade design. Finally, I have now I have a stock, like what a student clarinet would come with today, stock set of screws. I see these screws everywhere. I see these on the Bob Scott reissued Caspar design ligatures. I see these on old Harrison ligatures. Some people replace them, so these are just really cheap, mass-produced screws. You probably recognize the that sound because they're not very they're too freely floating in the rails. They still tighten beautifully, but can you make it a bonade? Can you make me sound like I'm back in 6th grade? I sound like I'm back in 6th grade. And again, this is the same ligature, same reed, same mouthpiece. I'm using the same air. I'm not really changing consciously what I'm doing, but I sound like I'm ready to play hot cross buns. There's no substance to the tone, so absolutely the most overlooked variable. And before you throw hundreds of dollars at a ligature, I highly recommend find an old off color. It looks like maybe yellowish in color, German silver ligature on eBay or off an old clarinet you can get for 20 bucks. I can't promise you the screws will fit, and I can't promise you it'll make whatever ligature you're playing better, but if you have a 2-screw design, especially screws on the front of the reed, it's going to totally transform it. I can't promise it'll be as good as what it sounds like here today, or what I hope it sounds like with this mic, but absolutely, absolutely ridiculous improvement in response. And material and density material, even plating, matters so very much and can be experimented with for very, very, very cheaply. Very cheaply.